All extraction teams, withdraw immediately. The 480 are designated operational casualties. The words echoed through the command center as helicopter pilots turned away. Protocol said the SEALs were already dead, too risky to save. On a distant ridge, a lone female sniper watched through her scope as her brothers in arms were abandoned. She switched off her radio and chambered around. Some orders deserve to be broken. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you believe in honoring those who stand alone when it matters most, consider subscribing to hear more stories of quiet courage. The tactical display bathed Colonel Thaddeus Blackwood's face in an eerie blue glow as he watched the situation deteriorate in real time. Each blue dot on the screen represented a member of SEAL Task Force Echo, 480 of America's most elite operators, now surrounded by a swarming mass of red indicators that grew denser by the minute. Sir, latest intel confirms enemy strength at approximately 2,000 fighters, Major Kendrick reported, his voice steady despite the implications. They've cut off all previously identified extraction routes and established anti-aircraft positions on these ridgelines. He highlighted sections of the mountainous terrain with quick gestures. The forward operating base's command center fell silent as the magnitude of the disaster became clear. What should have been a precision strike against a high-value target had turned into a catastrophic ambush in the remote valleys of Afghanistan's Nuristan province. Lieutenant Commander Riker's voice crackled through the communication system, broken and distorted, but unmistakably urgent. Command, this is Task Force Echo. We have 63 wounded, ammunition at 40% capacity. Request immediate air support and extraction. Situation critical. Repeat, situation critical. Colonel Blackwood's weathered face remained impassive, but the muscle tightening in his jaw betrayed his internal struggle. Assessment, Major? Kendrick didn't hesitate. Extraction would require at least 12 helicopters flying into heavily defended airspace. Probability of success under 15%. Projected casualties, 70% of extraction force in addition to current losses. Unacceptable, Blackwood muttered, though whether he meant the assessment or the situation remained unclear. General Wainwright's face appeared on the main screen, joining remotely from Central Command. Colonel, I've reviewed your tactical situation. The Joint Chiefs have made their determination. Blackwood straightened, already sensing what was coming. Task Force Echo is hereby classified as operational casualties. Wainwright continued, his expression grim but resolved. Strategic withdrawal is authorized and ordered. All remaining personnel will evacuate immediately. This operation is now containment only. Sir, with respect, Blackwood began, we're talking about 480 men. I'm aware of the numbers, Colonel, Wainwright cut him off. And I'm also aware that sending rescue forces would likely double that number. The decision is final. As orders were transmitted and the command center erupted into controlled chaos, the scene shifted to a rocky outcropping, 18 miles from the ambush site. Observation Post Delta sat perched on a windswept ridge, offering a perfect vantage point of the valley below, where tracer fire now illuminated the night. A pair of gloved hands adjusted the scope on a long-range precision rifle with practiced efficiency. Through the advanced optics, the sniper could see the desperate defensive positions established by the trapped SEALs, the enemy fighters moving to tighten the noose, and the faint lights of extraction helicopters in the distance, turning back. All observation posts, this is command. Immediate withdrawal ordered. Repeat. All personnel are to withdraw immediately. Exfil helicopters are en route to your positions. The hands on the rifle paused momentarily as the voice came through the communications system. Then they resumed their methodical adjustments. Observation Post Delta, acknowledge withdrawal order. Finally, a voice responded. Female, calm, despite the circumstances. Command, this is Captain Frost at OP Delta. I have eyes on potential extraction route Sierra through the eastern ridge. Enemy presence is minimal. Request permission to provide cover fire for rescue operation through that corridor. Colonel Blackwood's voice hardened. Negative, Captain. That's a direct order. All personnel are to withdraw immediately. The risk assessment is conclusive. Silence followed, stretching for several seconds. Captain Frost, acknowledge order. Through the scope, Captain Ezra Lynn Frost watched an enemy commander directing mortar teams into position that would decimate the SEAL's defensive perimeter within hours. Her crosshairs settled on his head as her finger caressed the trigger. "Captain Frost, do you copy? Acknowledge withdrawal order." She took a deep breath, held it, and squeezed the trigger. The distant crack of the rifle was followed by the enemy commander crumpling to the ground over a mile away. In the same fluid motion, she adjusted her aim and eliminated the mortar team's spotter. "Delta, what was that? Did you just engage?" Captain Frost, respond immediately. Master Chief Beckett, her spotter, looked at her with a mixture of resignation and pride. "We're really doing this?" Frost chambered another round. "I didn't hear anything. Communications must be down." She switched off her radio, effectively cutting herself off from command. From this moment forward, she was on her own, defying direct orders, risking court-martial at best, and a lonely death at worst. "Wind at 3 knots southwest," Beckett murmured, settling in beside her with his spotting scope. Frost made a minute adjustment and fired again. Another enemy fighter fell. "They won't send." "Rescue with the current threat assessment," she stated calmly, chambering another round. So, we changed the assessment, one shot at a time. As dawn broke over the mountains, the command center at the forward operating base descended into controlled chaos. Reports flooded in of precision strikes against enemy positions surrounding the trapped SEALs, impossible shots from extreme distances that systematically eliminated commanders, communications specialists, and heavy weapons operators. "What the hell is going on out there?" Colonel Blackwood demanded. "I ordered all personnel to withdraw." Major Kendrick studied the incoming data with growing confusion. "Sir, these shots, they're coming from multiple locations around the perimeter, distances exceeding 1,500 meters, precision suggesting advanced optics and expert marksmanship. Find out who's still out there." After several minutes of analysis, a communications officer looked up from his station. "Sir, we've triangulated the source. It's Captain Frost from Observation Post Delta. She never withdrew." Colonel Blackwood's face darkened with anger and disbelief. "She's disobeying direct orders. This jeopardizes everything." "Sir," Kendrick interjected, "enemy casualties are mounting. Their coordinated offensive against Task Force Echo appears to be faltering. Captain Frost is... She's creating confusion in their ranks, making them think they're facing a larger opposing force." General Wainwright reappeared on the command screen. "What's this I'm hearing about unauthorized operations continuing after withdrawal was ordered?" "Sir, we have a situation with one of our snipers refusing to withdraw," Blackwood admitted. "Captain Ezralyn Frost from Observation Post Delta." Wainwright's eyes narrowed. "Frost? Why is that name familiar? Pull up her file." Major Kendrick accessed the personnel database, frowning at what he found. "SEAL Team 6, Sniper Division, first woman to qualify for the teams, but most of her record is redacted, sir. Unusual level of classification." The general's expression shifted subtly. "Continue monitoring. I need to make some calls." By midday, the situation had transformed. Captain Frost had eliminated 37 high-value targets, creating disarray in the enemy's carefully planned operation. The trapped SEALs, realizing someone was fighting for them, despite the stand-down order, had consolidated their position and begun moving wounded toward the eastern ridge. The extraction corridor Frost was systematically clearing. A transmission finally came through from her position. "Command, this is Frost. Created an extraction corridor on the eastern ridge. Need air support in the next 20 minutes to get our people out. Sending coordinates." Colonel Blackwood's response was immediate. "Captain, you are in violation of direct orders. Return to base immediately." "With respect, sir, I can save them," Frost replied, her voice steady despite the distant sound of gunfire in the background. "But I need those helicopters." Meanwhile, Lieutenant Commander Riker reported from the ground. "Command, this is Task Force Echo. We have 42 critically wounded now. Ammunition at 20%. But we've identified a potential extraction point on the eastern ridge. Someone's clearing a path for us." Before Blackwood could respond, the command center door opened as Secretary of Defense Lancaster entered, accompanied by Brigadier General Quinley. Their unexpected presence immediately silenced the room. "Mr. Secretary," Blackwood acknowledged, standing straighter. "We weren't informed you were—" "Because this wasn't planned," Lancaster interrupted. "General Wainwright contacted me directly about Captain Frost." General Quinley stepped forward, studying the tactical display with keen interest. "You have a situation remarkably similar to one I witnessed 7 years ago in the Korengal Valley. Sir, Blackwood questioned. 83 Army Rangers trapped by superior forces. Command ordered stand down, declaring extraction impossible. Quinley's eyes remained fixed on the display. One sniper refused the order, created extraction corridors through systematic elimination of enemy leadership and heavy weapons positions. Sound familiar? Realization dawned on Colonel Blackwood's face. Captain Frost. Secretary Lancaster nodded. The ghost of Korengal. That operation was classified afterward because it contradicted the official assessment that extraction was impossible. She received the Navy Cross, and then they buried the story. She knew it could be done because she's done it before, Blackwood murmured, the full magnitude of his error becoming clear. At that moment, Master Chief Beckett's voice broke through on the communications channel. Command, we're taking heavy fire. They've identified our position. In the mountainous terrain, Frost and Beckett had been forced to rapidly relocate as enemy forces converged on their position. Despite moving, Frost continued to eliminate targets threatening the SEALs' movement toward the extraction point. Southeast Ridge is now viable for helicopter approach, Frost reported between shots. I count 17 enemy anti-aircraft positions neutralized. Remaining heavy weapons concentrated on our position rather than the extraction zone. Colonel Blackwood made his decision. Launch the rescue operation, all available air assets to support Captain Frost's extraction plan. She's surrounded, General Quinley warned, pointing to satellite imagery showing enemy fighters closing in on her position. At least 50 hostiles converging. Over the comms, they heard Frost's calm voice. Master Chief, get to extraction point Bravo. I'll cover from the secondary position. Not leaving you behind, Captain, Beckett replied firmly. That's why I'm staying, Frost answered, so no one gets left behind. As rescue helicopters launched from the base, Frost positioned herself on a rocky outcropping with clear lines of fire to cover both the approaching helicopters and the SEALs moving toward extraction. Her voice came through comms one last time before she switched to radio silence. I'll keep them off you until everyone's out. Just don't leave without a head count of far unders. Indy, though 80. Colonel Blackwood, now aboard the lead helicopter, heard the determination in her voice and recognized it for what it was. The same uncompromising resolve that had saved 83 Rangers years before. The same refusal to accept acceptable losses as acceptable at all. We're coming for all of you, Captain, he promised. Every single one. Dusk painted the mountains in shadow as the extraction operation reached its critical phase. 6 Black Hawk helicopters hovered above the ridge that Captain Frost had single-handedly cleared. Rotors kicking up dust as wounded SEALs were loaded aboard. Lieutenant Commander Riker directed the evacuation with practiced efficiency, though his eyes constantly darted toward the distant ridgeline where muzzle flashes indicated Frost was still engaging enemy forces. Colonel Blackwood monitored the operation from the command helicopter, listening to the steady updates from ground forces. 312 extracted, sir. 98 wounded aboard. Master Chief Beckett, having reached the extraction zone after separating from Frost, approached Blackwood with barely contained urgency. Colonel, we need to deploy the QRF now. Captain Frost is surrounded on 3 sides. Blackwood nodded grimly. Quick Reaction Force is already inbound. Their sole objective is to reach Captain Frost's position. As the last groups of SEALs made their way to the helicopters, enemy fire intensified around Frost's position. Through satellite imagery, Command could see she had been forced to retreat to an increasingly precarious location, her options for further movement severely limited. 452 extracted, sir. 28 still inbound to the landing zone. Lieutenant Commander Riker, despite his own wounds, refused to board until all his men were accounted for. And Captain Frost, he insisted. She's the reason any of us are getting out. The Quick Reaction Force fought through heavy resistance to reach Frost's position, finally arriving to find her wounded, but still fighting. Down to her last magazine, using her rifle with surgical precision to keep enemy forces at bay. Captain Frost, the QRF leader called as they secured the perimeter around her. Time to go home. Her first question, even as medics assessed her wounds. Did all 480 make it out? Thanks to you, they're either already in the air or on their way to the LZ, he confirmed. Only then did she allow herself to be evacuated, carried on a stretcher to the final helicopter as night fully descended on the mountains. When the rescue force returned to base, an unprecedented scene awaited them. Every surviving member of Task Force Echo, many, bandaged, some on crutches or in wheelchairs from the field hospital, had formed into perfect formation on the landing zone. As Captain Frost's helicopter touched down and she was carried out on a stretcher, all 480 saved SEALs stood at attention. Lieutenant Commander Riker, standing at the front despite his injuries, initiated a silent salute that rippled through the formation, a tribute to the one person who had refused to abandon them when protocol and probability said they were already dead. Colonel Blackwood approached her stretcher. "Captain Frost, I owe you an apology and my deepest gratitude." Her reply came quietly, weakened by blood loss but unwavering in conviction. "Just doing what anyone should have done, sir." 1 year later, at a formal ceremony at the Pentagon, Captain Ezra Lynn Frost stood at attention before military leadership and distinguished guests. Her recovery had been long and difficult. She now walked with a slight but permanent limp, a reminder of the price paid for her defiance of orders. The Secretary of Defense presided over the ceremony, his voice carrying throughout the hushed hall as he presented the Medal of Honor. "Today we recognize not only extraordinary courage in the face of overwhelming odds, but a moral compass that pointed true when protocols led us astray," he declared. "Captain Frost's actions remind us that our greatest military asset is not technology or strategy, but the unwavering commitment to leave no one behind, even when that commitment requires the courage to stand alone." As Frost accepted the medal, the camera panned across the audience where all 480 saved SEALs were present, many still bearing visible scars from their ordeal. After the ceremony, Colonel Blackwood, now retired, approached her. "You changed how we define acceptable losses, Captain. No one will be abandoned again." The scene shifted to a SEAL training facility several months later. A new class of candidates, including several women, inspired by Frost's example, stood at attention as an instructor addressed them. "Since Nuristan, we have a new tradition in the teams," the instructor explained, holding up a patch emblazoned with the number 480 and the words, "No one left behind." "When you qualify as a SEAL, you receive this as a reminder of what it truly means to be part of this brotherhood." The final scene showed Captain Frost, now an instructor herself, teaching a new generation of snipers, her lesson focused not on technical skills, but on moral courage. "There will come a moment when protocols and ethics collide," she told them quietly, the 480 patch prominent on her uniform. "In that moment, remember, we measure ourselves not by the missions we complete, but by the people we refuse to abandon." As her students filed out, one young woman lingered behind. "Captain," she asked hesitantly, "weren't you afraid of the consequences? Defying direct orders, risking court-martial?" Frost considered the question carefully before answering. "I was more afraid of living with the alternative. Some costs are too high, no matter what regulations say." She paused, then added, "True courage isn't about fearlessness. It's about finding something that matters more than fear." The young recruit nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes as she recognized the deeper lesson, that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism begin with the simple, defiant decision that some rules deserve to be broken when lives hang in the balance. 2 years after Nuristan, Captain Frost stood at the edge of Arlington National Cemetery, watching as families gathered for the annual memorial service honoring fallen special operators. Though the 480 had survived, too many others hadn't. She recognized the faces of widows, children, and parents who carried the weight of that ultimate sacrifice. A voice spoke quietly beside her. "They told me I'd find you here." Frost turned to see Secretary Lancaster, his official car waiting discreetly in the distance. "I come every year, sir," she replied. "I know, just as I know you visit Section 60 on the anniversary of Korengal." Frost said nothing. The secretary wasn't wrong. Every year she visited the graves of the 2 Rangers who hadn't made it out of that earlier rescue, the ones whose deaths had haunted her decision in Nuristan. "The President has asked me to discuss something with you," Lancaster continued. "A new joint task force, specialized rescue operations in denied territories, situations where conventional wisdom would say extraction is impossible. You're creating a unit based on what happened in Nuristan?" Lancaster shook his head. "We're acknowledging that what happened in Nuristan should have been standard procedure, not the exception. And we want you to command it." Frost looked back at the gathering families. "Who would it report to?" Directly to me, no intermediaries, no risk assessments from people who've never been in the field. For the first time in their conversation, Frost showed genuine interest. Rules of engagement? One rule: we leave no one behind, ever. The tactical decisions of how to accomplish that would be entirely yours. She studied him carefully. Why me? There are more experienced commanders. Because you've already proven you'll make the right call, even when it costs you personally. Because those 480 men are alive today. Because you valued their lives above your career. Lancaster gestured toward the cemetery. And because I think you understand better than most that sometimes the harder path is the only one worth taking. Frost remained silent for a long moment, weighing the opportunity against her current role, training the next generation of snipers. Finally, she nodded once. When do I start? 6 months later, Captain Frost, now Major Frost, stood in the briefing room of a classified facility, addressing the 20 operators selected for her task force. Each had been hand-picked, not only for their technical skills, but for a specific quality she had personally assessed: the moral courage to defy conventional wisdom when lives were at stake. The room included members from every special operations branch: SEALs, Delta, Rangers, Air Force Pararescue, and even several international operators from Allied forces. Among them was Master Chief Beckett, who had insisted on joining despite being offered a comfortable training position stateside. The unit you're joining doesn't officially exist, Frost began. Neither will the operations we conduct. You've all been selected because you understand a fundamental truth that sometimes gets lost in strategic calculations. Human lives are not acceptable losses. She activated the briefing screen, displaying a satellite image of a mountainous region in a country none of them were currently authorized to enter. 48 hours ago, 2 CIA operatives went missing in this region. Their extraction team was recalled when local forces mobilized. Command has classified them as operational casualties. Her gaze swept the room. We disagree with that assessment. Understanding dawned across the operators' faces. This wasn't a training exercise. This was their first mission. Wheels up in 30 minutes. We'll plan en route. Questions? Master Chief Beckett raised his hand with a hint of a smile. Just one, Major. What are we calling ourselves? Frost allowed herself a rare smile in return. Officially, nothing. But among ourselves? She pointed to the patch on her shoulder, 480 with the words, "No one left behind," beneath it. I think you can figure it out. As the operators dispersed to prepare for the mission, Frost remained at the briefing table, studying the terrain where 2 abandoned operatives were fighting to survive. The parallels to her own experience weren't lost on her, but this time would be different. This time, no one would have to stand alone. Secretary Lancaster had given her one directive when the unit was formed: change the culture, make leaving people behind unthinkable. As she gathered her gear and headed for the waiting aircraft, Frost was determined to do exactly that, one impossible rescue at a time. 5 years after Nuristan, Major Ezra Lynn Frost stood at the podium of the Naval Special Warfare Training Command, addressing the graduating class of SEAL candidates. The auditorium was filled with fresh-faced operators who had endured months of the most grueling training the military could devise. Among them sat 4 women, the largest number to ever complete the course simultaneously. You've been taught to follow orders, Frost began, her voice carrying through the hall without need of the microphone. You've been conditioned to trust the chain of command, to believe in the system. These are good things, necessary things. She paused, surveying the attentive faces before her. The room was silent except for the gentle hum of the air conditioning. But there will come a moment in your career when the system fails, when orders and ethics collide, when protocol tells you to abandon someone, but your conscience tells you otherwise. Her hand unconsciously moved to her leg, where the limp from her Nuristan wounds remained a permanent reminder of her choice. In that moment, remember why you're here, not to follow orders blindly, but to serve a higher purpose. After the ceremony, as the newly minted SEALs celebrated with family and friends, Admiral Lancaster, formerly Secretary of Defense before his return to uniform, approached Frost. That wasn't quite the standard graduation speech, he noted, though his tone held approval rather than criticism. They'll get plenty of talk about duty and protocol elsewhere, Frost replied. I wanted them to hear something different. Lancaster nodded toward a display case near the entrance of the hall. Inside was a weathered sniper rifle, her rifle from Nuristan, alongside a plaque describing how one operator had defied orders to save 480 others. "You know, when we created Task Force 480, I thought it would be a temporary measure," Lancaster said. "A stopgap until the broader culture changed." "And now?" Frost asked. "Now it's become the standard. Every branch has adopted the protocols you developed. The 'no one left behind' policy isn't just a slogan anymore, it's doctrine." He smiled slightly. "You did more than save 480 men that day, Major. You saved countless others who would have been abandoned under the old thinking." Before Frost could respond, a young lieutenant approached, clearly hesitant to interrupt. "Excuse me, Major Frost, Admiral. There's an urgent situation requiring your attention." Frost recognized the coded language immediately. Task Force 480 was being activated. "If you'll excuse me, Admiral," she said, already moving toward the exit. "Of course." Lancaster watched her go, remembering the defiant captain who had once risked everything to do what was right. The military needed more like her, people who understood that rules existed to serve principles, not the other way around. In the secure briefing room, Master Chief Beckett, now Frost's executive officer for the task force, waited with satellite imagery displayed on multiple screens. "What do we have?" Frost asked, all ceremony forgotten, as she shifted into operational mode. "Humanitarian aid workers trapped in Sierra Leone. Civil war just reignited, borders closed, airspace restricted. State Department has declared extraction diplomatically unfeasible and militarily prohibitive. Numbers: 27 aid workers, primarily medical personnel, plus approximately 40 local staff and patients who would face reprisals if left behind." Frost studied the imagery, already identifying potential approaches and extraction zones. "Distance: 800 miles from our nearest staging area. We'd be operating completely black, no diplomatic clearance, no official support." "So, business as usual," Frost remarked with the faintest hint of a smile. "Assemble the team, wheels up in 30. As she moved toward the door, Beckett called after her. "Major, there's one more thing. Admiral Lancaster left standing orders. He wants to be notified before we deploy." Frost paused. "Then notify him, after we're airborne." Beckett grinned. Some things never changed. 12 hours later, under cover of darkness, 2 modified MC-130 Combat Talon aircraft approached the Sierra Leone coast at wave-skimming altitude to avoid radar detection. Inside the lead aircraft, Major Frost briefed the 20 operators of Task Force 480. "The situation has deteriorated since our departure," she explained, pointing to updated imagery on her tablet. "Rebel forces have surrounded the medical compound. The aid workers were given an ultimatum to surrender local patients or face execution. They've refused." A young operator raised his hand. "Rules of engagement, ma'am? Defensive only. Our mission is extraction, not engagement. We create a corridor, get our people out, and disappear." Frost looked at each team member in turn. "But make no mistake, if they threaten those aid workers or patients, we will respond with overwhelming precision." As the aircraft approached the drop zone, Frost strapped on her parachute and performed equipment checks with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this dozens of times before. Yet each mission remained unique, each life they saved irreplaceable. 2 minutes to drop," the jump master called. Frost took her position at the head of the line, leading as she always did. The red light illuminated the aircraft's interior, casting everything in a crimson glow. "Remember," she said to her team, "we succeed because we refuse to accept failure as an option. Those people below have been told they're on their own. Our job is to prove that wrong." The light turned green. Frost stepped into the void, her team following seconds behind. The night air rushed past as they executed a high-altitude, low-opening jump designed for maximum stealth. Their parachutes deployed with minimal sound, guided by night vision toward the precise landing zone Frost had selected, a clearing just beyond the rebel perimeter. Upon landing, the team assembled silently, communicating through hand signals and encrypted radio when necessary. Frost led them toward the medical compound, moving like shadows through the dense vegetation. At the perimeter, she used a thermal scope to assess the situation. The rebels had established checkpoints around the compound but hadn't yet moved in. They were waiting for dawn to make good on their threats. "Team Alpha, Establish overwatch positions here and here, she directed, marking spots on her tactical map. Team Bravo, with me, we infiltrate through the drainage culvert on the east side. With surgical precision, the operators moved into position. Those assigned to Overwatch set up with silenced weapons, creating an invisible protective barrier. Frost's infiltration team slipped through the rebel perimeter without firing a shot, reaching the drainage culvert that intelligence had identified from satellite imagery. Inside the compound, they found the aid workers barricaded in the main building, armed with makeshift weapons and prepared to make a final stand to protect their patients. United States military, Frost announced quietly as they entered. We're here to get you out. The lead physician, Dr. Holloway, appeared stunned. But we were told evacuation was impossible, that no one was coming. Someone was wrong, Frost replied simply. We have transportation waiting, but we need to move now. How many need medical evacuation versus those who can walk? While her team prepared the evacuees, Frost established a secure communication link with the MC-130s circling offshore. Talon 1, this is Phoenix. Package secured, 67 souls total. Requesting extraction at Point Bravo in 15 minutes. Negative, Phoenix, came the response. Rebel forces moving toward Point Bravo. Recommend alternate extraction. Frost recalculated instantly. Understood. Redirecting to Point Charlie. Alert the QRF, we may need assistance. Outside, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Rebel forces, perhaps alerted by sentries, had begun advancing toward the compound. The Overwatch team reported increasing activity. Major, Beckett warned, we're about to have company. Time to extraction point? 20 minutes minimum with the wounded. Frost made her decision. Team Alpha, create a diversion on the west perimeter. Team Bravo, prepare to move with the evacuees through the eastern corridor. I'll take point. As she led the column of terrified aid workers and patients through the darkness, Frost maintained constant awareness of their surroundings. When a rebel patrol approached too close, she silently eliminated the threat with her silent sidearm, never breaking stride. The extraction point, a clearing large enough for the MC-130s to land, was still 10 minutes away when gunfire erupted behind them. The rebels had discovered the empty compound and were now in pursuit. Move faster, Frost ordered, knowing that speed was now their only advantage. When they reached the clearing, the MC-130s were already approaching, their engines audible in the distance. But so was the sound of pursuit, rebels crashing through the vegetation behind them. Form a perimeter, Frost commanded her team. Get the evacuees ready to board immediately upon landing. As the aircraft touched down, rotary engines still spinning, the task force created a protective corridor for the aid workers and patients. Frost directed the loading process, ensuring the most vulnerable went first. Suddenly, rebel forces broke through the tree line, opening fire on the evacuation. The task force responded with precise, measured fire, enough to protect, but not enough to escalate unnecessarily. Go, go, go! Frost urged as the last evacuees boarded. She provided covering fire as her team members retreated into the aircraft one by one. A bullet grazed her arm as she backed toward the ramp, but she barely registered the pain. Master Chief Beckett reached out, pulling her aboard as the ramp began to close and the aircraft accelerated down the makeshift runway. Inside, Dr. Holloway approached her as a medic treated her wound. They told us we were on our own. That extraction was diplomatically unfeasible. Frost smiled slightly. Some things are more important than diplomatic feasibility, Doctor. As the aircraft gained altitude, heading for international airspace and safety, Frost moved through the cabin, checking on evacuees and her team members. No casualties. Mission accomplished. Hours later, when they landed at a secure military facility, Admiral Lancaster was waiting. The evacuees were quickly moved to medical facilities and debriefing rooms, while Frost and her team prepared for their own debriefing. You were supposed to notify me before departure, Lancaster said, though there was no real rebuke in his tone. Communications issue, Frost replied with the ghost of a smile. Must have been atmospheric interference. Lancaster shook his head, knowing full well it had been deliberate. 67 people who would have died otherwise. Hard to argue with those results. That's what we do, Admiral. When everyone else says it's impossible, we find a way. Later that evening, as the task force recovered and prepared for whatever mission might come next, Frost stood alone in the hangar looking at their aircraft. 5 years since Nuristan, Dozens of impossible missions completed, hundreds of lives saved, all because she had made a choice that day to disobey orders and do what was right. A young female operator, one of the recent SEAL graduates, approached her hesitantly. "Major Frost, I wanted to thank you. Your speech at graduation was what made me certain this was where I belonged." Frost studied her for a moment. "What's your name, Lieutenant?" "Addison, ma'am. Charlotte Addison." "Well, Lieutenant Addison, remember what I said about that moment when orders and ethics collide? It will come. Maybe not today, maybe not for years. But when it does, trust yourself to know the difference between what's legal and what's right." The lieutenant nodded solemnly. "Is that how you knew? In Nuristan?" Frost looked back at the aircraft, remembering the weight of that decision 5 years ago. "I didn't know if I could save them. I just knew I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try." As they stood there, Frost's secure phone vibrated with an incoming message. Another situation, another impossible extraction, another chance to prove that "no one left behind" wasn't just a slogan, but a promise. "Duty calls, Lieutenant," she said, already moving toward the operations center. The limp from her old wound was barely noticeable anymore, worn smooth by years of refusing to let it slow her down. Behind her, the young lieutenant watched with admiration, understanding that she was witnessing the living embodiment of the lesson Frost had tried to impart at graduation. Sometimes the greatest courage isn't found in following orders, but in knowing when to defy them for something more important than rules or protocol, the lives that hang in the balance when everything else fails.